Hello and welcome back to AR77. Today we are quite literally bringing out the big guns. As you can see on the table in front of us, we've got two quite large revolver replicas. We have the Colt Python here in chromed finish with the kind of faux wood grips, and we've got the Smith & Wesson 629 in this stainless finish and these kind of Hogue grips here. Both classic designs, both big hitters in the world of revolvers. There's some amazing revolvers out there for replica collectors. You've got the Colt Single Action Army. You've got the Webleys. That collection seems to keep growing and growing and growing. You've got the Schofields and the Remington, the Sheridan Cowboy, I think it's called. All the Dan Wesson pistols that are made by ASG. You've got the original Dan Wessons in 8, 6, and 2.5 inch. Then you've got the more recent Dan Wesson 715s. Again, great revolvers. But these two have a particular place in my heart because they have that kind of classic styling. And I thought I'd bring these two out because they share a couple of kind of visual style cues as well. I have a favourite of these two. So if you particularly want the Smith & Wesson, you're going to go for the Smith & Wesson. If you particularly want the Colt, you're going to go for the Colt. If you just wanted a larger revolver, classic kind of revolver in your collection, maybe this video can help you. One of the things to bear in mind is if you're a replica collector and part of your kind of tick list is about function and operation, revolvers, as I've said in previous videos, are a really good place to go because you don't have to worry about if it's a stick mag or if it's a full-size mag. You don't have to worry about if it's got blowback or not. The replica revolvers out currently are so accurate in terms of the way they operate, especially these shell-loading revolvers, that it's a really good place to go for some kind of replica action. What else was I going to say? Oh yeah, there's a significant difference between these two in that the Colt Python is I'll try that again. 4.5mm BB shooting replica air pistol, and the Smith & Wesson 629 here is a .177 caliber pellet shooter. Both pistols are house the CO2 in the grips. I'll show you how to get to that shortly. But yeah, both are powered by CO2, and they're both, as I said before, kind of shell casing. Shell firing revolvers. So let's look at some of the similarities. Well, I guess the biggest thing really is the full length kind of underlug here, which kind of houses your kind of shell rod there that releases the shells. That's probably not the right term for that. Somebody will tell me what the correct term is. It escapes me at the minute. But both of these have got those really long, full underlugs, and it makes a difference to the styling. I think it makes the gun look really well. There's the Python, and here's the 629. Just with the length of that, what a delicious looking pistol. A slight difference to the barrel lengths here, if you will. We've got the 6 inch here, and this is 6.5 inches. In terms of certainly the outer barrel on these pistols, like the real world barrels. So let me see, although that looks, I don't know if I can fit this on, but yeah, so if you put the cylinders together where they would be, you can see the difference at the end of the barrel. So let me just put that to one side for a second. When you hold the Colt Python in your hand, it feels like a big gun. You know you've got a big hunk of metal in your hand, and you've got all those kind of Walking Dead vibes going on. It feels like a really lovely pistol. Neither of these are loaded or have CO2 in or anything like that. So yeah, really lovely pistol, really big hunk of metal. Both of these pistols are full metal other than the grips. But as big as the Colt feels, the Smith & Wesson just there's a whole different quality to the feel of this. partially because of these lovely kind of Hogue style grips. Although it's a bigger pistol, and I would say slightly heavier, or certainly that perception is it is slightly heavier in my mind. I'll double check that. But because of these grips, it feels more comfortable in the hand, in my opinion. It feels a more comfortable hold than the Python. Let's look at it from the front then. If we take the Python and we look at the sort of the front blade here, if we look at the sight picture, you can see that front blade shows up really nicely in that rear sort of groove, just because of the fact that it's kind of reflective. Really, it's just chromed like the rest of it, but it kind of catches the light, so it's almost like you've got a white dot on the front there. So that works really quite nicely in most environments. Having said that, I think I prefer the really clear red dot right at the front of the Smith & Wesson. I can see that far more clearly in reality than it shows up there on the video. I quite like that red tip on the end there, and it feels like just a better design generally, rather than relying on reflection or in certain circumstances hoping that there is no massive reflection on the front of the Python. Both have adjustable sights, as you can see here, for both kind of windage. Let me get that in the frame. Both windage, and you can elevate that as well at that side. I thought. Oh yes, sorry. So you can elevate this, and you can slide this this piece along here as well. So you can adjust that sight left to right as well as up and down. We've got a little adjustment point there. We can adjust it. Here we've obviously got up and down there, and probably better left and right there because it's got a screw, so it's a better design, I would say. Markings wise, it's nice to have the 357 there, Magnum, and obviously that Colt marking there. I do like the Colt kind of stud in the grip as well. I do like, this is 44 Magnum rather than 357, and I do like the Smith & Wesson logo there on the grip, as well as on the back there. Really nice, and that's kind of not just on there, that's kind of etched in, which is a really nice touch. So some really nice markings on the Smith & Wesson. The way they operate obviously is slightly different as it is in the real world. So to eject the cylinder on a Colt, we pull this tab back and the cylinder just pushes out like that. Put that back. On the Smith & Wesson, it's similar but different. We push it forward and then push the cylinder out. Feels like a much bigger cylinder, that one. Feels like a really chunky, nice, well-machined piece of metal. The other thing, of course, as you can kind of see by these, I don't know what these are called, but they kind of give you a clue as to the direction that the cylinder is going to rotate. When we cock the Colt, that moves in a, it's probably best to show it from this direction, it moves in a kind of a clockwise direction. So watch the cylinder here. You see that move in a clockwise direction. When it comes to the Smith & Wesson, you can see that those kind of catch points show you that it's going to rotate in the opposite direction. So if we cock that, it moves in the opposite direction, just like in the real steel. And if you listen to that mechanism, listen to the Colt here. Okay, it feels quite, or it sounds quite clicky, whereas this is a bit more, I don't know if that's coming across on camera, a bit more definite, a bit more not rigid, but I guess better quality. than that one. Both, there's a tiny bit of wiggle on the trigger here. No wiggle on the hammer. When it's cocked, this is the Python, no wiggle on the hammer, no wiggle on the trigger, and it all locks up really nicely. With the Smith & Wesson, tiny bit of wiggle on the hammer, nothing on the trigger, but once again, when it's cocked, everything locks up really nicely. I would say that one of the things I like less about the Python is this sort of the actual cylinder itself. Although it moves very nicely, it rotates very nicely. I guess I should spin it that way. It feels a bit kind of, well, I'm going to use the phrase, a bit kind of loosey goosey. Pop that down there again. With the Smith & Wesson, less so. It feels far more sturdy, far more. I mean, the size of that, it just feels like a real big chunk of well-machined metal, as I said before. But yeah, that feels a bit more sturdy. It feels like it's better quality, if I'm honest. Also, I think the finish, I know this is nice and shiny, this kind of stainless finish, and we do have this machining. Can I focus on that? On the actual cylinder itself. It does look rather a bit more subtle, a bit more kind of just less bling, but still a fine example of the pistol. With the Python, it's nice, it's very shiny, and if chrome is your thing, as I must admit, I don't mind a bit of chrome, as you'll have seen through a couple of my other pistols. I do like that, but the finish looks a little cheaper than the Smith & Wesson. Having said that, these are cheaper than the Smith & Wessons. I mean, this is a pellet pistol, so it's 9 times out of 10 a pellet pistol. It's going to have the rifled barrel, it's going to be a bit more accurate, and it's going to cost more generally than a BB pistol. And these are a bit newer than these, so these are closer to the £200 mark, these are closer to the kind of £150 mark. Both really good guns, I will say that. Both shoot really nicely, both a pleasure to load. For both of these pistols, we have these ejecting shells which come out, and you just put in this case, a pellet in the back there. It goes in, and it's either single action, or you have the full-on double action. Let me demonstrate that once again with the Colt. So the same thing, you have these shells. If I can get hold of one here, there you go. For these ones, the BB goes in the front, in these kind of rubber bits here. The BB goes in the front. Again, I prefer a fully metal shell. So different ones of these operate differently. You can get, for example, my single action Army is a BB pistol, but that has a full metal shell, and the BB actually goes in the rear. So there's that. I prefer a full metal shell, but never mind. Same thing. The shells take the real ammunition, then get placed in the cylinder, then get placed back. And as with the Smith & Wesson, the Colt is single action or double action, as you wish. So again, both a pleasure to shoot. Both have working safeties. I should point that out as well. On the Smith & Wesson, it's more akin to the Dan Wesson replicas, which you would imagine because, well, the clue's in the name. I won't go into the history of Smith & Wesson and Dan Wesson and all of that, but you have S at the back here, so we just click that back, and it locks out the hammer, locks out the trigger, and the pistol cannot be fired, which is good. On the Colt, we have quite a nice safety here. If it's forward, let me show you this from this side. If that little switch behind the hammer there, if that's forward, then you get a little S there, just showing you that that's safe. Once it's in the rear position, you get F and a red dot letting you know that it's ready to fire. So I think I quite like that because it's quite subtle. Having said that, I think I prefer that everything happens with this little toggle switch here in terms of safety, and then pushing it forward to release the cylinder. So that would be my preference in terms of safety. I think the Smith & Wesson would win that one. The biggest difference, I think, in these pistols is in the grip. Let me show you. So in terms of the Colt, the Python, loading your CO2 is really straightforward. You get your Allen key, and it goes in there. You unscrew it, drop in your CO2, and then tighten it back up and pierce it, and you're ready to go. So the grip doesn't move. It is you can see it's a two-piece piece of plastic, and it doesn't look like wood. It's brown, I'll give you that, but it doesn't genuinely look like wood. Obviously, that's the metal of the actual frame itself. I know that some of you have painted those black or coloured them black. I know that you can get a version of this which is black, and it has a black grip, which probably looks more realistic. You know, anything that looks realistic about the front part of the gun is a little bit undermined, I would say, by this wood effect grip. But you know what? For me, that's not a massive deal breaker. It's not a massive deal breaker. I don't look at the grip very much when I'm shooting the pistol, so it's it's largely covered by my hand. At which point I can kind of live with that. Actually, I can live with it. I would have preferred it if they'd have made these a little bit darker, and the different style. I think these are kind of combat grips almost, or something like that, I think they call it, where they've got these kind of finger grooves here. I prefer the more traditional, where it comes out to a bit of a lip. If you've seen The Walking Dead, you'll know the one that I mean. It's a more traditional style grip. It's not curved. This is almost like a fastback grip, or soft tail, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but it's fine. It serves its purpose. For anybody who knows what I'm talking about, anyone who's got an actual Python with the actual grip that I'm talking about, or anyone who's done a bit more research than I have, feel free to just let me know in the comments what those other grips are called. For the Smith & Wesson, we have this lovely, again, Hogue style grip, and the quality of this is really great. It's a really soft, kind of rubbery. It doesn't feel plastic at all. It's nice and rubbery. Yeah, that feels really good, and it's really contoured well to a hand. The way that these open is, again, you'll have seen this sort of method before. You've got a little notch here. You can just take that off, and that shows you the housing there for the CO2, and you have your built-in kind of hex key there. So you don't need a separate element like you do for the Python. You just tighten the CO2 there, and then you find where is it there? It's just at the top of the frame. That has to index with that. Corresponding, then we clip it shut. Once that's shut, it feels really firm. It doesn't feel like two pieces, and actually the split between those two pieces, I would say, is perhaps even less apparent in the I don't know, there's perhaps not much in it. Let me get both of them together. Yeah, there's perhaps not much in it, to be fair. To be fair, let's not split hairs. So, two lovely pistols, both excellent replicas, really. There's some things that are a bit Marmite about these pistols. If you're particularly looking for a Colt Python, you're going to want something more like that. But if you want realism, I'm going to say that this grip might spoil that over the Smith & Wesson. Obviously, this is a bigger pistol. You can get it in shorter barrels. As you can with the Colt, you can get this in shorter barrels as well. Two lovely examples of two classic large caliber revolvers. I think, for me, the difficulty is, generally, I would say I prefer a Colt Python to a Smith & Wesson 29, in this case a 629. The 6 is just to denote that it's a stainless version, but it's still essentially the same frame as the M29, the Dirty Harry pistol. So real world, I think I prefer the shape of the Python. I think that's possibly one of the most beautiful looking pistols I've ever laid my eyes on. Not this particular version, but some I've seen online. But in terms of my air pistol collection and my revolvers, this is better. It's just an opinion, folks. Don't get your panties in a bunch. This is my favourite. I think this looks the most realistic. It's such a beast with that extra kind of half an inch at the end of the barrel. The cylinder itself, you can see, is just a far more kind of meaty affair on the Smith & Wesson. I like the subtle kind of black but really practical grips. I like the fact that the bells and whistles here all work in that one place. Everything else is comparable. I prefer the red dot at the front of that, the sort of the red blade at the front there, and I really like. I'm a sucker for a little bit of detail like that, so I really like that Smith & Wesson kind of marking. If you were to pick up either of these guns, I don't think you would be disappointed. If you like things really, really shiny, you're probably going to go for the Colt Python. If you just like things a little bit reflective, you're going to probably go for the 629. These are more expensive. These are less so. But if you were to buy one, yeah, I'd go for that one. In fact, I would suggest, if you don't have a preference between Colt or Smith & Wesson, and you could afford this, I would be tempted just to save a little bit extra and go for the Smith & Wesson. I don't think you'd be disappointed. Nor do I think you'd be disappointed if you didn't get either of these and went straight for a Dan Wesson 715. The 6-inch looks gorgeous. I don't have it in my collection because I've already got the 4-inch and I've got a few of the Dan Wessons. But yeah, all of these revolvers are terrific. So you pay your money, you take your choice. Get out there, get them in your hand, see which feels most comfortable. I would say you probably need a slightly bigger hand for this to feel just as comfortable, because it's quite broad right at the top of the grip there. Whereas, as you can see, the Smith & Wesson gives you a bit more allowance there for a smaller hand. So even though it's a bigger pistol, it might feel more comfortable in a smaller hand than the slightly smaller Colt Python. Hope you enjoyed that brief comparison, not a review as such, just a look at some of the details on both these pistols. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for sticking with me, or thanks for joining me if you're a new viewer. All the very best. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.